Good afternoon. I think it is appropriate that we were scheduled to be the very last ones for today. It's not so serious a session because for the last 2 days we've been listening to things that are smart, useful, everyone is tired of that, and let us talk about other things tonight, about cool things, amazing things, amusing things, and important things. And here we have very professional experts here. I'm very happy to introduce to you Laura Zimlianska. She is the head of the research department of Deloitte and Touche. And I would also like to introduce to you Andrei, because you've seen him more than once tonight, Andrei Makarov, director of the marketing department at MTS. We also have here a true banker, Yaroslav Shuvayev. If you look at him, just by the look of him, you can say that he's a banker, unlike most of us. Representing Akbar's Bank, we have the pleasure of the presence of Dmitry Pshek. He's the art director of Yandex Money. We have a foreign participant with us today. It's Raul van Angelshove, representing a very well-known gaming company called IBM. And I would also like to introduce to you a representative of an internet social networking project, Yuri Ivanov, who is the director of e-commerce at Vkontakte social network, and Vadim Rumyantsev, head of Mail.ru group, the Money project. So I think the social networks are more like banks than the real bankers are. So with that, I think we can get started. We can talk to each other as professionals, and considering that it's getting late, we could step outside of our professional shells and try to, daydream, become visionaries, and maybe scare the audience. I will start by showing you a number of slides which will be used to tell you about what is simplification, commoditization, and gamification of products, and what is really happening with the payments and with the finance realm in general. Well, first of all, we can see very clearly, and this has been raised more than once. We talked about BSD2, because the payment services are converting themselves into infrastructures. Now, this is just another type of utility, similar to water supply or electricity supply. Which is also very important, which we probably do not quite understand, is that payments are becoming a social service, and the government should guarantee that any legally present person on that territory could have access to payments and banking services such as cashless payments. Payments stop being independent. They are getting transformed from something tangible, something you can single out, into something that is sometimes not very serious, into some environments that are not very serious. Sometimes they operate within messengers. We have payments integrated into social networks, and payments are becoming pervasive and ubiquitous. What is also quite important for our times, and that's indeed a piece of news that is probably characteristic of the last years, is that the payments are they are disappearing completely. They are vanishing. For example, take Uber or Yandex Taxi. When you use this service, but you do not actually make a payment, you hop into a car, you drive a distance, you get out of the car, you say thank you, but you don't physically pay, you don't physically exchange money. And in a similar way, you have direct debits to your account, automated debits to your account when you pay for your utilities, whenever you top up your mobile account. And these are the payments that are becoming more and more independent and invisible, independent from well-known payment brands. What is really happening in this realm from the standpoint of regulation? This is a process which is quite universal and global. It is characteristic of all industries in general terms, but now we are at the point when these changes have come to the banks. And PSD2 is something that deprives banks of its monopoly over the interface. This is what Yandex does, Kontakte does, Facebook does. So we have a universal interoperability, which used to be characteristic of such industries as, let's say, cellular networks, cellular communications. So there's another document which is not well known. Please raise your hands if you heard about PSD2, the second Payment Services Directive. Please raise your hands. Well, okay, everyone knows about it. But do you know about the European Directive for Payment Accounts? Excellent. We have one person who has heard about it. The Payment Accounts Directive is actually equally important to PSD2. The gist of it is that the banks can no longer term their services on their own. You can not decide whether you call it a penalty or an increased fee for a late return of the overdraft money. So if you go to a Yandex market and compare very transparently the conditions that various banks are offering their services, that's another novelty. And in the nearest future, they are looking at this. Everyone believes this is going to happen. What is going to be regulated is the movement of your account from one bank into the other. You can move your account with all the accessories such as automated payments, debits, and credits. It's going to be as easy as to move your number from one cellular operator to another, from Megaphone to MTS, for example. This means that the payment service is becoming completely commoditized. It will become a water supply service, electricity supply service, and it will stop being unique. And this is where we are going to discuss a number of important issues. Additionally, such as, for example, will the markets need many banks in such situations? If we have these services that are more or less the same, do we need 400 or 500 banks for that? Will the market need the diversity of payment products and tools? Now you can use a card to pay for your groceries, or you can use an electronic wallet. You can have a direct debit. Maybe you can use a terminal for payment. Do we need this diversity, or will the payments become a monoproduct? And then, most importantly, does the customer need all of this? Do we invent all of these things on our own, or do we actually follow what the customer dictates to us? So these are the questions that we will try to discuss in the next 90 minutes or so. Wonderful. I have a list of questions. I'm ready. I'm prepared for this session, and we'll have some serious work to do, and we'll go according to my script. And the first question I would like to ask is going to be directed to Laura. Laura, would you please tell us, you as a consultant and as an analyst and as a theoretician of the payment and financial market, would you tell us everything that I've said, is it really indeed important? Is it really happening with the financial services? Are these services really losing their unique identity? And are we now at the crossroads where we stop seeing the difference? Is there anything left other than the price competition? And where is it all going, this whole process? Hello, everyone, dear colleagues, the last survivors. Thank you for being here. And thank you for inviting me here, for giving me the floor. Well, thank God I'm not a theoretician, nor am I a consultant. I am the head of the research center. Therefore, I have this unique opportunity to always speak directly with the target audience that we study. And as for the business per se, I can say that I see it from an entirely different angle. Therefore, I'm not going to be theoretical in what I'm saying. I'm going to be speaking more about the real practice. And if we speak about the term of commoditization, when we see similar products on the market, yes, indeed, this is a trend that we can see, and this is the subject that we raised at the previous FINOPOLIS forum last year. We presented our other project, which is a corporate business project. Whenever we service corporates, it's more difficult to surprise them, to awe them with something new compared with the individuals. It's really difficult to come up with something that will really be a surprise to corporate clients. But commoditization is a trend. It's here. I mean, it's just a fact of life. It's neither good or bad. But in order to work with it successfully, you need to understand why this is happening. And if we're talking about some prerequisites of this, what has led to this, I can say the following. That's the vision of me and my team. Whenever we talk to our clients, whenever we talk to potential clients, we can say that there are two reasons for that. There is an external reason, as always, and there's an internal reason. The external reason is that this is the consequence of 2014, which is the high degree of uncertainty in the banking sector, something that impacts how the clients perceive the banks, how they perceive it as a business. And the bank's customers, potential and current ones, are in the field of hard-to-reach audience, and therefore it is more difficult for banks to hear what the clients are saying, and therefore they have to use various technology tricks in order to understand what is the statistical portrait or profile of the customers. These are the fintech technologies that we discussed today, the big data and so on and so forth. But if we talk about the sensitive and sensible factors that could influence the behavior of our customers, we do not need big data for that. We can construe this information from the communication with your target audiences as a bank. But it is more difficult to communicate with the clients. That's true because of this uncertainty and the lack of desire on the part of the client to really tell you what they really think, or simply because you don't have enough information and you don't have an understanding of what is happening and what is going on. And they may not be in the mood to tell you the truth. That's another possibility. The reasons may be diverse, but it's difficult to really know what the clients think about the bank. And over the last 2 years, communicating with the customers has gotten really hard, both with the corporates and the individuals. And therefore, this commoditization is the consequence of the fact that the banks had gotten harder to listen and hear their clients. So these are some of the factors that we've identified, trying to figure out what's going on. Of course, we have some leading banks among our clients, and they always ask those questions. How can we understand what our clients need? How can we verify whether what the client has told us is true? Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe they're misinformed before they made those conclusions. Therefore, I will not speak about all of the potential solutions that exist, but there is a solution to this. We can use technologies, neurotechnologies, in order to address these challenges. But that's the backbone of everything we do these days. Speaking about the price competition, obviously, whenever we see this process of commoditization, it's easier for banks to make a decision to compete on the in the field of pricing. That's efficient and that's convenient, but that's a consequence, and that is not something that is happening on the mass scale. The banks do try to enroll or to roll out new products, and of course, these new products not perceived in the right way by the customers if these new products are rolled out without taking the price factor into consideration. And that is a very astute comment you made. Speaking about our approaches to working with our data, we started using neurotechnologies quite actively, various types of it. We've done tests of various types of software that can be used not just by the banks or in the retail business. We've identified some software and hardware which would be very useful from the standpoint of working with the bank's clients. After FINOPOLIS, we're going to present a report. It's going to be available on our websites. But let me say before that there are some things that are underestimated from the standpoint of the well-being of the client, the psychosomatics of the client. And this is something that is neglected sometimes, but this is something that one needs to work with. And if I haven't covered some of the topics in my response, please let me know, and I will try to delve deeper into the particular issue. Well, that was a great answer to my question, and maybe we can ask other speakers to try to address it. And let me ask Yaroslav the next question. Let's try to be more specific regarding what this means for a Russian bank. What is your vision of this commoditization? What do you think about price wars and so on?
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Well, we saw some waves of commoditization, different stages when I worked in Alpha Bank, and we had the mobile application that had to be paid for, and it was a great source of income. But then we had to do away with it because we saw that there was outflow of funds, and then we faced another stage, some income from conversion, and then the other banks entered this process, so we had to abandon that as well. So we observed some waves with the reduction of the fees, so we do understand that commoditization is coming here, and the banks have to take that into consideration, and we see more frequent waves and Standard Poor's. We can see there that the business models are advancing and developing, and the cycle is becoming shorter. So something new has appeared, it has been copied, and now you find yourself in an ocean. So it happens like in the morning, and to the end of the day, everything has changed. So what do we see there? The current business model, we do understand that we will see a constant reduction in income. And here we see the price competition and the reduction of average income per person. And if we have the existing business model, then we will have to build up the potential to retain the clients, to control the inflows, because it is difficult to control this type of income. So I'd like to quote here from Alice, that you have to invest a lot just to stand where you are, and the speed is very fast, and we have worked a lot in order to close up the hygiene for mobile applications, in order to deal with breakthrough solutions afterwards. And we think that it is not only our viewpoint for our company. We are divided to the current change, and this is an obligatory condition. We have to have a department that is optimizing this commoditization features, and in parallel we are launching new services and new products in order to be ahead of competitors, to be serving like a lift, and to get the necessary figures for the average monthly income. So that is the process we see there. And what does that mean for banks? What we have to pay our attention to? We have to understand that we have three functions for a bank. The digital bank, if we talk about that, we mean granting loans, also the debit, credits, and also the payment function. So we do understand that the payment function is on the verge of changes. The commission fees have been reduced to the maximum, and if we talk about the payment function, our discussion is dedicated to this topic. So in the future, we will observe building up the functionality in order to retain clients in terms of the payments. When we subscribe a client for monthly write-off, monthly debit, and when the balance of a mobile phone reaches a certain limit, the same applies for fines and penalties. We will aggregate the data for the payment for loans, for repayment of the loans at your bank, at other banks. So we say that we will introduce automation into this long-term life for the bank and for the client. So that is what is in store of us in terms of the payments. And many banks, as you know, are implementing the model when they do not use any fees for payments, any commission, but they try to attract customers by providing these conditions, and we are trying those options as well. So that is in general my vision. If you have questions, I will be glad to answer them. Yes, I have a question, and you have to answer it. So what do you think? We will not be talking about loans because payment section, we have gathered people who are professionals in the sphere of payments. What do you think? How many payment products will a client need in 1 year, in 2 or 3 years? So will we have the same extensive range of online banking, payment cards? Will that be expanding? Or you think that we will have one basic payment, one basic procedure in different forms? What we see today, banks do not always sell their services in their own personal space, and they use it like a shop window. So the actual payments implemented after it is connected to the mobile applications. So we envision a bank more like a sales channel, and so the faster we get the client, the customer, the faster we will link and connect his or her card. So we are now fighting for the inflow, for getting the customer, for attracting the customer as soon as possible. So we can say that it will be a kind of hygiene. The payment functions will be there, and one of the few aggregators that will still remain on the markets will be used in order to connect the card, in order not to reconnect afterwards. So if we talk about the basic things, it is like that. As for B2B, the function is coming away from banks. Telegram implementing a joint product with Sberbank, and this is the topic for messengers, more for messengers. So we will have both ways. So where customers will meet each other in a mobile banking application, and then they can transfer money to anyone they want. So there will be a combination and the kind of convergence and a channel. Okay, excellent. Please turn off the microphone because we have the limit of simultaneously working mics.
From European point of view. Sorry, I will speak Russian, or not to switch. Что вы думаете?
So what do you think from the European standpoint, from the international point of view, as businessman, as a client? Do you think that the services in Europe will be commoditized very fast, and the price for these services will become equal at all the banks, or the banks will have some chances of retaining their identity and the chances to compete with some product means or methods?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the question, Viktor. And I apologize for having to do this in English, so really apologize, but that's my only way of communicating today. But let me also say, at the first starting point, I'm an optimist. So I want to say I'm an optimist. And I also would like to say, commoditization is not necessarily the end of the world. Now, having been working for IBM for 30 years, I've seen a lot of commoditization in the technology. So I've seen a lot of commoditization in the technology. If you would take a look at other industries like automotive, you see a lot of commoditization in that industry as well. So I think in the banking industry, I'll come to your question in a second, Victor, but in the banking industry, I think this commoditization is a natural evolution of when technology starts to come in and scale of the industry also starts to come in. Now, what do we see in Europe? In Europe, we see a couple of things. First of all, the margins are very, very thin. So the spread in which you have to run a business in banking is around 1.5%. So if you have to run a business at 1.5%, you really are pushed to the limits. So you're going to use technology to the limits. Payments is not a differentiating factor. In banking, you would assume that you do payments. So it's not assumed to be extremely differentiating. Actually, payments is quite costly. Now, bring the two factors together. So you have thin margins and you have a high cost environment that is called payments. On top of that, you get regulation. You mentioned PSD2. I would also mention instant payments, where you have the instant payment environment. You operate in an environment where the euro is actually taking away foreign exchange, I would say, fees. So your earnings potential around payments is quite limited as a result. So what do we see? What do we see? We see payments being, of course, commoditized, but actually we see collaboration. And I think this is the key word. When you talk about commoditization, we also talk about collaboration. So you see far more collaboration across banks to create payment engines and to share payment infrastructures. You see this on the back end. You actually see this also on the front end, where ATMs are being shared, which is back to the cash part. But that's also a form of payment. So I would say the collaboration around payments, the collaboration around other areas that are, I would say, commoditized, is increasing. And this is the same that you see in automotive industry. This is the same that you see in the energy industry. You see collaboration. And I think this is the word. Commoditization is leading to collaboration. Now, where do you then differentiate? That's the other part of the same coin. So if you do more collaboration, where is it that you start differentiate? And I see clearly a trend in terms of how do you deliver payment services, how do you insert payment services into value chains, how do you participate on broader platforms with payment services is where you differentiate. This differentiation point is actually on the move, but that's on the front end, not so much on the back end. Now, final point I would like to make. When you start to take a look at the business models of our clients, if you take a look at what's happening in the banking and the business models that are evolving, you see actually that other income, not interest income, not necessarily fee income, but other income starts to become a far more bigger element of a need in terms of how to change the banking organization. And therefore participating in ecosystems, creating a different business model around customer segments is what we see happening a lot, Victor. And a final point, just to give you a little bit of a thinking that is happening around this different business model. And I'll give you an example that we are really working on end-to-end in the farming, in the food and agri. When you set up a platform around the farmer, be it the crop farmer, be it the chicken farmer, be it the dairy farmer, and make sure that everything that the farmer needs is being delivered from the platform, including the banking services. You monetize a different business model. So, and this is driven by commoditization.
Well, you have brought us to a number of questions, but before we start discussing them, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Andrei Makarov, and I'd like to ask him to have a look at the problem of commoditization from the two standpoints. The first one, Andrei has a very good payment history, and he knows how commoditization works with payments, but also he's the only one in our panel who is inside the industry where commoditization has gone far, quite far. The services of mobile operators have been hugely commoditized. So can you comment commoditization, not from the point of view of the payment industry, but just to compare, to draw a parallel or maybe differentiate? What is the difference between the evolution of mobile industry and the evolution of in industry? So are there any lessons or any opportunities that we may take into consideration? Thank you, Viktor. Thank you for the invitation to take part in this session. It's very interesting. And I think that you have great pictures on your slides. I liked it very much, especially when a man is saying something. Yes, this picture. Yes, I liked it a lot. Because that is what is happening. Somebody has said something, and Vadim, on the other end, he interpreted it in a different way. And thanks God, we have mobile phones when you can call somebody and without any distortion deliver the information. Vadim, can I call you? Yes. But now I was listening to what the previous speakers were telling us, and I completely disagree that commoditization is taking place now. People have been paying in cash, and now they are still paying in cash. And ATM, we had them in the past, and we still have them as payment cards. We used to have them in 1960s. Somehow they changed a little bit, but the size has not changed. Some new factors have emerged, that is true, but they are still there. But the main task is still the same. Applications, yes. Applications have appeared, so you don't need to use a large PC. So you can browse the internet from your mobile device. So that is the convenience that we see in current environment. So do we need only one product? No. The banks are doing the same thing. Yes. And they have been doing that for a long period of time. And you use your payment card, your credit card for the salary. So that is the same. As for mobile connection, it can be different in terms of the coverage, speed, and we have heard that proper marketing should be in place in order to have an effective cooperation. And in Contacti, if they launch the mobile application, but the connection will still remain megaphone connection, and there was no coverage in some regions, and we will still face the same situation. So we can't pay with a card in certain places, and the same will happen in future. So at some marketplaces, you can pay in cash, and it was like this 10 years ago, and it still remains like this. So commoditization, I do not understand that. Viktor, that is why I asked you what commoditization is about. Because, for example, I can't understand what is the difference between sparse card from MTS bank. So the differentiation is in the color. No, the color is the same actually. The cashback is larger, is bigger. We can argue about cashback. I have 10%. No, it's not about that. It's about economy. Yaroslav mentioned that the processes are structured so that banks and mobile operators are trying to look for an additional niche to earn more money. So that's it. And the margin will be reducing. That's true, and it's a normal thing. But sometimes, about the customer, the gamification, the last slide of Viktor has shown us this gamification. Will payment serve as a game? Well, let's not raise, because we have the certain list of questions with the sequence of the questions. So my personal viewpoint is that we do not have any type of commoditization. So we are changing based on the changes in the market. The technologies are changing. In our network, we have 120 gigabytes of traffic a minute.
So everyone is sitting there and looking at what's happening. It's hundreds of gigabytes of information a minute. So in the era of YouTube, when everyone is uploading information there together with the clips and the videos, and no longer do that with other social networks, therefore consumption is going to grow, and the mobile operators will have to make their network better, communication quality better. And what shall the banks do in this case? Make their cards better, open new accounts, because today we heard that the banks need to make their services convenient for the customer. Services like opening accounts, and that would mean they would have to change within their systems, but the access to these systems will be provided by others, not by them, such as cellular operators, various social networks, social media, and they will be the ones that will enable an easy access for the consumer. And yet, there would still be such a process as opening accounts, repaying the loans. Those things will never go away. Radically, there will be no change, and nothing has changed radically in the last 40 years, maybe even over a longer period of time. Why 40 years? I mean, you can say over the last 2,000 years. Yes, 2,000 years. Great. If we can, do some summing up now, I think we're talking about one and the same thing. Some people call this commoditization. Some people call it non-commoditization. So commoditization is, well, all the cards become very similar. So instead of a universal product, you have a card. And so when the bank asks you a question whether you want Visa or a MasterCard, you would be puzzled by that. You would be taken aback because, well, the world has moved on. So let us just hang this question for a second and let us talk about simplification of the payment model. And I would like to direct this question at Dmitry. The title of the session is something that tells us there are ostensibly two modes of payment. Well, two trends of payment. They should become more invisible. And there is the gamification concept here. I don't know where it stands in our conscious right now, but a couple of years ago it was very popular. It was something that was discussed at infinitum by everyone. From your standpoint as a professional and a user, would you like to see payments the most simple, disappearing, vanishing, or is it best to create around them some kind of an element of a game to make it more interesting to pay. And let's say the bank can help this playing individual to buy more transactions. Which point of view would you subscribe to? Thank you very much for your question. Well, hello everyone. There is no single answer to a question. We are discussing who does what, but let's think about who and what is being felt by everyone. Please raise your hand if you like surprises. Well, I think most people like surprises. I mean, if it is a pleasant surprise, of course. It's an important caveat. Most people like pleasant surprises. I'm sure there are characters and heroes that have been able to, turn off all of the notifications on their smartphones. But when we have a new number next to your account, on your Facebook account or somewhere else, I mean, that's something that intrigues you. We hope that something good will still happen to us, and maybe it hasn't. If it hasn't happened to us, it will. That's the way people are built, are made. If we think that if there is something new coming up, that maybe something that will spice your life up a little bit. Now, raise your hand, those of you who does workouts in the morning, every morning. Well, not all of you. But if we knew, if we did the morning exercises on a certain day of the week, we would get some prize award, or maybe you would get a text message saying that you received 250 euros on your account because you do your morning exercises every morning. That's what people want to feel. And there are things that people push away from themselves, such as, for example, the need to do something according to a very rigid plan or schedule. That is indeed that edge, that boundary, where we want to draw the line. We want the routine operations to, be away from my emotions. I know that I have to pay my utilities, but I don't need to think about it. Yes, I know that I have to pay for my communication services to Rostelecom. Okay, I don't want to know about this. Okay, let them debit my account automatically, but I don't want to think about it. So I've topped up what I have in my account, and I did it specifically to make sure that they have enough money to, withdraw from my account to pay for my. So I decided to add a greater amount of money to my account, and then after a while, I noticed that I accumulated a few $100s on my account without even noticing this, and this is a pleasant thing that happened to me. We want routine operations. Nobody wants to lose money. Nobody wants to see their amount going down. But everyone likes a text message saying that you've just been in receipt of a salary. Everything we are doing for pleasure. And we're looking at things from different angles now. We have a partner who works with us on offers that we have. What is an offer in this case? Okay, you've just paid for your phone, and now you've just given an offer to have a 15% discount if you fly S7 Airlines. That's very simple. If you see that the service you've just been provided leaves a very nice footprint, that probably means that the person would use that service more often. He would know that there would be positive things happening to him rather than the negative or neutral things. But if he feels that's amazing and new things are happening to him, he would feel great. And that feeling during the shopping process, when you see an offer that has been customized to you for this moment in time, our statistics show that 40% of Russians go through the internet through Yandex. Of course, Yandex knows this very well, and they target their ads at people in a more pointed way. So we claim to know that we want to know what people need. It can be a ticket, it could be a coupon, and we also understand that the time factor is very important. For example, we shouldn't offer you large purchases a week before your salary is due. Maybe you would even get upset because this is an offer that you might miss out on and wait a few weeks. And maybe we shouldn't offer a momentary and instant credit to people who cannot immediately repay the people, because we can analyze how purchases are made by that individual. All of these scoring systems are based on that simple principle. If you are good from the standpoint of the system, why not please you? And it seems to me there are no secrets here. That's the way we are built. That's the way our brain works. We want to derive pleasure out of things around us. We want to be pleasantly surprised, and there is nothing bad in the system thinking about it in advance, getting ready for you, offering you something that maybe you hadn't expected. It's like calling your mom every 2 weeks. If you always call her on Saturday, maybe she will start, making guesses why it is every Saturday. But if you make yourself a reminder that you should call your mom every 11th day, everyone will be happy, and the calls will come in randomly in her mind. So whenever we can get away from the negative emotions, we should do that, and the payments should be happening that way. That uberization that was mentioned today, but if we want to immerse a person into something that is pleasant, let us do that for that individual. Let us understand that person better. Let us feel that person better. And we have done a lot of studies. We've interviewed users. We've tried to understand why they're using our card less, what has gone wrong, why they are, turning off some payments. That is something that the banks will be doing. If all banks become the same, if all the applications will be doing the same things, then the user will choose that service or application that is pleasant for him to use. Well, that's all I had. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And let us indeed talk about money and emotions and endorphin and other hormones. And this is something I would like to ask of Vadim Rumyantsev. What we are observing now is a drift of payment structures towards their gravitation towards social networks. So as an external expert, as a client maybe, as we discussed earlier, what do you think? How interesting is all this? Is it a good thing that the payments are gravitating towards the social networks? Is it something that makes business more convenient for the client and less profitable for the banks? And are there any undercurrents here? Because we're mixing things up here. Thank you for your question, Viktor. Let us start with yesterday. Yesterday, a question was raised whether a classic bank with a well-developed branch network become a digital bank. Some successful entrepreneurs were saying, no, never. We should start from scratch, and only after that you will be successful. It seems to me that a classic bank will never become a social network until the bank sees the social network as yet another channel of communication with the user. The maximum the bank will achieve here, he would move the client support into the chatbot sphere, and that will be the end of it. And since we deal with messengers and social networks, that's what we push our users towards. So we want them to feel comfortable, writing rather than talking. But in Germany, for example, there is a small feeder bank. It is built around a certain community, and every service that it offers is assessed by the users. And what Yaroslav was talking about, what Dmitry was talking about, is a case where the services are becoming emotionally tinted in a good way. So this is something that they're trying to do. They try to provide the users with the positive emotions. So the banks have lost the privilege or the function of just being the payment maker, because the social network no longer needs a bank in order to make a payment. You just need to have a payment license, and then you can effect the payment. And the bank can still retain the lending function, for example, or, for example, receive and then disburse salaries. So whenever you need the banking account, of course you need the banks, but the payments systems within networks is something one would regard as an independent function. And it could be a shop window, or, for example, Contacte included the transfers in the messenger. And so while you're conversing, you can make a transfer or send money while you are in your messenger. And that is something that allows me to resolve my financial issues in parallel with communicating with others. It's good to always have the ability to have the money in your account and not to subscribe inadvertently to a loan that you didn't intend to subscribe to. As to a forecast as to what's going to happen in the near future, I think more and more of financial services are going to be moving towards the social messengers. The brands are strong, there is trust. And then the banks will still be performing their banking function. Thank you very much, and I cannot refrain from asking an impromptu question. It's going to be directed at Yuri and Andrei, maybe. Which brand is stronger, the mobile operator or a good social network? Andrei, how many active subscribers a month do you have? 80 million. We have 97 million, so we're stronger. Thank you. Am I a user? I downloaded the Contacte application. I went there. Do you consider me an active user? What if I didn't look anything? I tried to find Vadim there, and I couldn't. Okay, I see. So it's still considered to be an active one. Okay, I see. Okay, you can call me. You don't have to find me on the social network. If I have a SIM card, it's registered on the network, and I have 0 calls. Do you consider me an active subscriber if I called once and then didn't finish the call? And why would you do such a thing? I wanted to find Vadim. I take it that both social networks and mobile operators have a guideline book with an answer to this question. And maybe Yuri can say something about what I asked Vadim about. Let us talk a little bit. There's nothing you want to add? But I will also have another question for you. Well, what Vadim told us about is great. It's wonderful. It sounds natural. It sounds useful. It sounds normal as we talk about the development of the social network environment. But isn't there a danger that when we move too many payments into the social media realm, we will be tainting our friendships? Because our friendly relations are going to be used in order to prompt us to buy things, which is something that is already being done quite actively, or, prompt people to make other types of payments because they are essentially purchases as well. So in Contacte, how do you, balance between the desire to monetize your service and the desire to not get into this friendly flair that the Contacte is all about? Well, first of all, I would like to say hello to everyone. Hello, thanks for coming. Speaking about the question, Vadim played truant during the briefing, and so he didn't know what I was going to talk about, so he, I think, spoke about everything, and hopefully I will be able to answer some of your additional questions. Hopefully you will have them. But speaking about the money and friendship, I do not think that this is indeed something that can be harmful or detrimental. On the contrary. See, this is just a tool that can be used in a diverse set of ways, like a scalpel. It's something that can be used in order to save life, or it can be used to stab someone. A hammer is something that you can bludgeon a person with, or you can build a house. So speaking about the money transfers, this is a tool that it's unlikely going to spoil your friendship. For example, I know that a friend of mine has a birthday. I want to congratulate him. And as we discuss this, we decide that we want this colleague of ours, Katya, for example, we want to buy her a certificate to go to a cooking class. And while still being engaged in this conversation, I have several options. I can bring cash to my colleague and he will go and physically buy the certificate. There are several problems here. Well, first of all, I need to get this cash somewhere. It means I need to go to an ATM and withdraw the cash. Then I need to walk physically to the individual who will be buying the present and give him the cash. But let's say the certificate is only sold on the internet, and the money will then have to be placed back on that person's account, on his plastic card. That's going to be a protracted story. What is my second option? In the chat, I can ask him, give me the number of your banking card. I'll transfer you the money. Well, he would say, I don't have Tinkoff, but I only have Sberbank Online. Or maybe he's got something like MTS Bank. Who knows? And give me your card number. Well, he would say, if you transfer me funds, then I will have to pay some commission. Then I will have to move from chat to Vkontakte onto the mobile application of that bank, or maybe we'll go to my desktop computer, to the web version of the computer. I will have to log in. I will have to enter my bank card number. If I'm good, I will do it on the first take. Then maybe I will have to recheck it. Then I will enter the amount. I will have to confirm my transaction. Then I will go back to the chat, and then I will tell you, write me a text message, tell me when the money arrives.
And the third option, you can just add money to this message and you receive the verification code that is sent to your mobile. And if MTS delivers that on time, but 100 rubles, that is the minimum you could send, and CVC code. If you do not know the CVC code, well, that's strange. You don't have the card with you? Well, that is the security issue. Well, probably he's trying to send money from some other person's card. So the money has been sent, and auto verification has been sent, and you know that the person has received the payment, the transfer, and that is the easiest and most convenient way. And it will not have any negative impact on our friendship. So about the second issue, when the payments are coming into the social networks, I would like to differentiate two things. C2C, that is the first issue, and B2C, between a customer and the business, their relation. So it's not a secret in our audience. We have 97 million of active users across the country in Russia. So the outreach is more than 65 million. No, it's not fair. About 80 million. I mentioned that for Russia. Yes, but you have not worked. You have not been operating beyond the Russian boundaries. Well, I asked you the wrong question, and because I injured your heart and killed the duck. So at the end of discussion, I can reserve some time for a battle, for trolling. Okay, an actual battle. So colleagues from Yandex Money, he mentioned that 40% of users with Yandex login, they are browsing the web, and 80% of Runets are using Vkontakte login, and we know a lot about users, and with such outreach and the audience, it would be stupid for brands, including large banks, not to enter this ground, not to open a digital branch office, because this is a kind of a digital branch office, and 97 million is a lot from the point of view of the outreach and physically. So many people do not go to physical offices, and of course the presence of banks is different. Some are rendering client service and the shop window with the products and the services and the consultations that are provided in parallel, and there are a number of digital communities, and you can enter that without leaving applications, and these built-in application can help you resolve any task. You can have an opinion poll, you can have digital questionnaires, you can have money transfers, submitting applications for a card, and so on. So here we have an unlimited number. It is limited only by the fantasy of the banks, because they have the built-in frames, and this is the only limitations they may have. So what are we coming to? Building an ecosystem when our user will not have to leave Kontakte application in order to resolve some everyday tasks. So he can, for example, order through Delivery Club to order some food, and in the next window he can purchase an air ticket, and it will be sent to his private messenger. Or he can buy an electronic book, and it will be delivered instantly to his account. And also he can buy a ticket for a certain event for the weekend, and then he will be sent a ticket to this event, and he can download it from the phone, and he does not have to print it. He can order a taxi, telemedicine, for example. At our platform, currently we have Kinohot, where you can buy tickets for cinemas, one-to trip, when you can book a hotel, you can purchase air tickets and telemedicine, and we can continue with this list. So all everyday tasks, all the issues that may arise in terms of the relationship with the business, not necessarily only financial issues, I can write to MTS community asking about the tariffs, because I do not understand all the terms and conditions, and they operate in several seconds, because the colleagues are responding quite fast with the integrated system of MTS, so they quickly respond to my question. Or I can write to a bank, and I will ask about the terms and conditions of a new deposit, of a new account, or I can ask specific question about the operations of my account. I will be asked with some authorization data, and then they will provide the consultation. So I will meet my needs, not only financial ones, but including financial needs. And the payment is done with the connected card, and I enter the verification code, and then it is done. So I do not have to think where I have to go, where I have to enter the bank details, so it is much easier. That is the story. Excellent. Viktor, if you allow me, I would like to add to that. So not to be mistaken, how is that done with the services in social networks? We are moving away from a hard identifier, the number of the payment card, and that is the money transfer to a friendship. So speaking about the friendship, we asked CVC code because that was the first money transfer you wanted to make. And as for the negative side of the social engineering is the following. And if my friend G. Gid, that is his login, and if his account has been hacked, so his friends could get a message with asking for money. And if the friends are financially literate, then they will, of course, call the actual owner of the account, and they will ask whether he got into trouble and he really needed help. So we have to use this two-factor identification because we do not trust this person. And as soon as Andre makes 1, 2, 3 transfers, then we will perform the scoring. We will know his behavioral pattern, and we know that each day of the month he would be sending money. And it's about the bridge we are having towards the banking sector, because social network knows a lot about users, and we can build a model, we can perform the scoring, and that helps us to do all these operations, the debit, the credit, and that can be used to protect the client and to help the client to give positive emotions when he needs them. Dim, I agree with you. I would like to add. Ella, in one of the sessions, has been saying things about adaptive identification, and when we trust a client, it doesn't really matter for a client whether we know something about them. And for example, some people will be surprised if they are not asked to provide the code. And for many people, it doesn't really matter how it is done. The system identifies the ways to do that. And if we trust a person, then it is done like this. Thank you. Victor, I'd like to answer. So Vkontakte is just a website with a large amount of users with acquiring that has been installed for them. In other words, if we reformulate it, a banking acquiring. Vadim, you're representing banking organization? No, credit organization. Okay. And I can become a principal participant of payments system and render the services for acquiring through our our partners. So you are a large platform that decided to sell some other services, for example, Delivery Club that you mentioned, and then you get the fee from that, the commission. The fee, which kind of commission do you mean? In acquiring or the agent's commissions? No, I do not understand the question about we being the large platform. And Ray, I'd like to apologize. I'd like to ask a number of questions to everybody. So we will deal with those complex things a little bit later. So as for people who do not know how the payments are being made inside social networks, I think that most of the people present here, they know what is happening there. So we've agreed that we have commoditization or any other name we may use, and the cards are becoming equal, are becoming the same. The process is ongoing. As Raul has mentioned, it is not the end of the world. We still see that happening. Banks, as formulated by Vadim, and we agreed with him silently, maybe everybody except Yaroslav. So banks are certainly like a source of funding. Yaroslav also mentioned an amusing thing. So the service and the aggregator, he mentioned one or several of them. So I'd like to ask a question to the audience, first of all. So everybody is saying that the number of banks is reducing. The Fitch has written that in 2 years we will have a 2 times reduction in the number of banks in Russia. And we do understand that in Russia we have hundreds of banks as in around the world. It is a kind of historical process. It so happened. So let's have a small voting. Please raise your hands if you think that in order for the financial system to function properly, Russia needs 100 banks, approximately. I think that a lot of bankers are here with us today. Okay. Who thinks that in order to function properly on the financial system in Russia, we need 10 banks? Okay. And who thinks that in order to ensure funding and to render the service, 1 bank will be sufficient? Are there any people who think like that? 1 person. Excellent. Can I ask our speakers to briefly, in one or two phrases, to express your viewpoints? So we have said how we are making payments more interesting and more secure, and how many basic financial institutions, not mobile operators or social networks or electronic wallets, so basic financial institutions, how many of them do we need for a large country, for Russia? And Raul can choose any other country, of course.
And I think, first of all, I like the animated discussion. I really enjoyed. I have my own opinions, but I really enjoyed the animated discussion. Now back to how many banks? I mean, it's of course a little bit of a philosophical question, but I think the question is really pointed because it's a real question. It's a real question, and the market will, I would say, will decide a lot on this for sure. So the market will also decide a lot. Now, if I would take what's happening in Europe, and I would take my country, Holland, three banks, and we came from about 40. So 3 banks, 40. I mean, those are the dominant banks, where two were controlled by the government, because they had to be rescued by the government. Now, personally, I think, what you're going to need is a very stable system. So there is a combination here, and this is my point. I think you need something that is combined by governmental area, where you're not making, because it's utility. Certain areas in banking are simple utility. And you have to think a little bit about utility functions, where there's no risk, and you have about risk-taking functions. And in the risk-taking functions, you would have the market deciding. So, you would find an area where you would have utility. I think you probably will get less than 5, would be my view. And then you have areas where you have risk-taking dimensions of banking, where you loan, where you have securities, where you have a lot of operations, and that's where the market will decide on what kind of services and products you offer. But integrating risk with utility, I think, it's not going to be the future of banking. I think you will separate utility functions from risk-taking, risk-carrying functions.
And utility function will be function utility.
Utility function will be performed by one gigantic state bank or by several banks.
To separate the risk and the operational security, because you can't have one system failing because it fails the country. So you need something that is, I would say, safe the country, because you can't have the country stop.
3 is okay.
3 is okay, 4 is okay, 5, but not more.
At least.
Да.
Laura, I pass the floor to you. If I may, I would like to reformulate the question. Yes, of course. In order to have a healthy competition on the market, 2 players are sufficient. But Russia is not a kind of industrial country where the health competition can be ensured by having only 2 players. So if we talk about the figures, 100 is too much, 10 too little, probably an average of 50. But it's not about the quantity, about the quality. What is the process on the market, and what is the interaction and relationship between the banks? What is happening in Vkontakte is an absurd thing for me personally, because this is the service that has been rendered by the banking sector, and it is coming into the social networks. It's not a thing that can be considered a normal one. So the banking sector is unstable right now, and the banks are perceived in another way. There are certain problems, but when these niches are not covered, it doesn't mean that they should go inside social networks, because social networks have been created for other functions, and it is increasing the risks, not only in banking sector, but also in other spheres. And if it happens that money transfers that are conducted in social networks will be covering some illegal illegal activities, it will undermine the whole economy. And the institutions should not be performing the functions that they are not liable for from the very start of their existence. So personally, I don't understand this kind of debate dedicated of those issues, because there should be no question like that. Okay, fine. It's a pity that Laura has not mentioned this remark at the very start of our session. No, we can go back to it. No, we heard what you said. We were talking about emotions. How do we study emotions? Okay, do you like secrets, and then persons are frightened by those questions, and emotions are studied in another kind of way. When something is being implemented somewhere, I can say, for example, we hear that from clients, what is happening in the banking sector. The clients do not approve of that. They do not approve of the shift of payment system into the social networks. Okay, we heard what you said, and now I would like to finish up my statement. If Laura mentioned that at the beginning of our discussion, we could have a discussion dedicated only to one question, but little time is left, and we have Andrei, and the plane is ready to take off. The private jet is waiting for him. So just briefly, I would like to ask you in turns to answer the question. Now, Yuri, how many basic banks do we need?
Of course, I would like to comment on the previous statement, but if we're talking about the number of banks, I would like to vote for the first option. I think under 100, because 10 is probably not sufficient, considering the spread of the country, its federative nature, and the fact that the banks could use various and different business models. Some would want to focus on mortgage lending, others on consumer and retail lending. Some would want to work with salaries, others would want to support just corporates. And in all of these niches, it would be good to have at least several competing banks, because 2 would not be sufficient in my mind. 10 maybe still too little, but up to 100, that would be appropriate. Now that we have 600 banks, and every morning we wake up to the news that on Yandex or in Telegram channels we hear about yet another bank having his license pulled for lending to associated businesses that belong to the owners. We all know what I'm talking about. So maybe it's 2 or 3 banks each month. So I think the number is going to shrink definitely, and the Fitch forecast that was mentioned is quite realistic if we look at the current rate with which this is happening. Andrei, you go. I will be very brief. I don't have a private jet. You will have it at one day. I totally agree with you. Regarding Vkontakte, of course. Now let's define what a bank is. We're talking about the number of banks. We talk about an organization with a very solid, heavy license. But do we need to count such organizations that do not have such license, the non-banks? They do something similar to a bank, but they are not regulated by bank regulation. Well, I understand that we are treading unknown, uncharted waters. You can turn Vadim on or turn him off, but I have MTS Bank. I'm worried. What Yandex Dengi is a non-commercial organization, or Mail.ru is a non-profit organization. And Yandex Dengi or Money are non-commercial organizations. Shall we take them into consideration? Well, what I believe is, if the government decides that we should have 10 banks in the country and every bank will be either doing everything and present in all regions or focus on something specific, then that's one approach. The second option would be there will be a financial organization for every industrial group to deal with their own problems. But that's a different approach. And in that case, there will be a reduction of banks with the rate that we're seeing, but it will not be below 100. But then we'll have other financial institutions such as MFOs and non-commercial organizations. And I think there should be good banking institutions that can really be trusted by the people. Plus, they also should allow mobile operators to provide loans to the public, open accounts where people could put their deposits and store their deposits there. We could connect other services. So I believe that cellular operators are the future. Because there's only 4 of them in the country, it's easier to regulate them. They are stable. So the short answer is 4 cellular operators. But let's not be that drastic. And now we're finally getting to the real banker in Andrei's terms. Indeed, speaking about the number, I don't think the number really influences the quality. To give you an exact number, it's hard for me to do that. Well, I really like when we talk about the true banks, because banks can grow within their accelerators, various organizations with different types of licenses that could be tied to finances. And indeed, we have incubators and innovation centers. We always come up with different ideas and new financial products. We understand that not all of them are fitting the banking license proper, but others wouldn't be launched under the main brand just for reputation reasons, and others are initially solutions for the bank, and then they become spin-offs, and then they live their independent lives. Speaking about the optimal number, I think the number should be as many as the market decides. There shouldn't be too few of them, but we need to get rid. But give me the number. You really want me to give you a number? Okay, let's say up to 100. So we have a consensus in that part of the room. Now, who's next? The next one is going to be Dmitry Pshek. What would you say, Dmitry? To use an analogy, if we have a set of rules, and everyone observes them, the banks all observe them. I mean, I would vote for 100. If you compare this with an educational system, there can be a state-owned university, there could be a number of small private ones, and the Ministry of Education sometimes comes to them and pulls their license. But I think in our diverse world, we have to have the ability to choose what you like, what fits us most. And so if the university is across the street from you, it will be easier for you if your child decides to enroll there. And then you will explain to him that the very first university education doesn't mean at all, doesn't matter. But if you decide to go to your summer home and then see that all of these cars are the same, of the same make, the same color, with the same clearance, and I think it's the same story with the banks. We get restrictions, we get bans. I think the market should be the decisive factor. And you probably don't even remember the brand of your favorite jeans, but this is the very first thing that you would reach for when you want to put something on, and the bank should be exactly like that. It should fit your needs. Thank you. Vadim, you're going to next. How many banks there has to be? Very quickly, 100. It's a beautiful number. And secondly, I'm guided by the consideration of the size of the company. The smaller, the more compact the company, the faster it can move. And if it's a giant company, it will take this company a while to roll out new services. From the standpoint of fintechs, it is good to have a number of small dynamic banks. Thank you very much. And we always tell people this: we are not a bank, but can we also be a bank? Well, I think Raul is unique in his assessment of 3. Let me support what you said. I'm also voting for 3. we have three options here. One of them is a battle. The second one is to give the social network an opportunity to comment on Laura's answer. But, you know, if you use today's terms, battle is one-on-one, and here is going to be several against one. So, unfortunately, we only have 4 minutes left in this session. If I may, let me ask you a question that it really bothers me, and it's really very much in line with everything, with what we've been discussing, especially because that Andrei doesn't have a jet, and the real plane will not wait for him. So we've had a great discussion so far. Within our circles, we get this feeling that payment improvement is getting near its natural ceiling. If we take retail payments, we are now using plastic cards. We used to have this magnetic strip. Now we have a chip. Now we have EMV cards, contactless cards. Now we have the telephone. It's all fun. There are two important things here. Number one, nobody has to pay for it. And we all like to use our cards and phone for payments, but if we are told that you will have to pay 1.5% for your transactions, nobody will be using that. I think we were all happy with the magnetic strip. It was less safe, but let's not go there. Okay, we'll start with that end of the room to be more fair. In a couple of sentences, can you tell us whether everything that we have been discussing contains a lot of potential for growth, or whether we have already approached that point where our payments are nearly perfect and we just have to, you know, tune up our bolts and nuts and be perfect? I will start with you, Vadim. I will agree with you, Viktor, that right now we are competing not just for the zero cost of a payment, but rather the payments, or rather the customers are asking for something extra, not just a discount that would be going to their plus. We are very close to what one would call a perfect payment. Dimitri, what do you think about this? I think the best form of a service, the perfect form of a service, is the complete absence of the service, and I hope that the next time I walk up to a counter and want a coffee, they would not ask me what I want. They would just give me my coffee. So Uber is the summit of the evolution, right? Well, it's a little bit more than this. If I want to fly to Prague, I would simply want to say, you know, where I want to live, and the system would tell me what I need to be able to afford this year. So the payment shouldn't be there. It should disappear completely. Thank you. Well, indeed, I think I can expound on this a little bit. Where is the potential now with the payments? It's the recurrent payments, triggered payments, automatic withdrawals and debits, the use of the payment service for regeneration and recovery. There's a huge potential if the regulation changes in the blockchain area, because this would allow you to make trans-border payments easier, interbank payments easier, and use various types of digital derivatives for payment. I think this is going to be really an explosion of activity in retail payments. That's very briefly all I had to say. I would like to tell you a story, a very short one, please, about a wonderful city of St. Petersburg that Viktor needs to fly to in his private jet 2 hours after my commercial flight takes off. But 20 kilometers away from this wonderful city, there's a small village, Irinovka. There is a train station there, the Road of Life, a wonderful road. All foreigners want there to visit the Ladoga Lake, and they have the acquiring center of Akbars. They use contactless payments there, everything works. But once I walked up there, and there was a girl walking up to the teller, and she put 30 ruble worth of coins, putting them on the till, and she asked, can I have 105 rubles worth of cigarettes for 30 rubles, and then the rest of it I can pay later. When will you pay me back? Okay, in a week's time or the day after tomorrow. So he would open up a notebook and he would say, Masha, she owes me 70 rubles. In a day and a half she will repay. And there were 3 pages filled with numbers like that and names. What are we talking about, really? About Apple Pay? Some people don't even know that there is such a thing as Apple Pay. And the number of phones that support Apple Pay and the MTS base is 1/8 of all phones. So, no, I'm sorry. Contactless cards are 10 million, but Apple Pay devices are about 3 or 4 million. So, what are we really talking about? When contactless payments come to our phones, to the regions, and here it's only 20 kilometers away from a multi-million city of St. Petersburg. So I think there is a lot of room for improvement, a lot of growth potential, and I think that's where the service of Kontakty is going to be really in demand, especially when it comes to returning that debt to the cashier there at the store. Well, that's a St. Petersburg battle. You have to respond to this somehow. Well, I think Andrei came to this forum from the 19th century. While I understand that it's a huge Frankenstein, a federal mobile operator with a lot of branches in the regions, departments. Do you have a directorate of departments of divisions of departments? No, we don't. But let me finish. When you go to Irinovka, you came there with Apple Pay, right? Once. Acquiring of Akbars is there, and there is a Ingenico terminal that will accept your Apple Pay. And what are we really talking about? And does MTS support Apple Pay? Yes, it does. So you came there, you have 3 to 4 Apple Pays. And how many Android Pays? 6. So that's already 10. Let's add Samsung Pay. And that's part of Android Pay, okay. So 10 million people. Is this few? Yes, it is. So it's really a battle. It's really a real fight. But speaking about the ideal, the perfect payment, I would like to support Dmitry. I think whenever the user doesn't want to think about such a payment, but rather wants to think about what he wants to get, we shouldn't really want to make him think about that payment. We will think for that individual, will simplify his life to such an extent that we'll only be thinking about either getting coffee from the coffee machine, and he wouldn't have to take any extra steps. Or if you buy something online, then we wouldn't want him to take any extra steps. Yes, we do have to have the scorings. We do need to have security checks. We want to prevent fraud from occurring, but we don't want extra steps in verification if we can avoid this. That is something that we can avoid doing. We are getting closer to this perfect payment, but there is still room for improvement. Thank you. Laura. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. The technologies are evolving. It's important for us not to go back to the QWERT or to the button with the concierge. All right, thank you.
I don't want to, because we're over time. Payment is a moment of value transfer, so we should not forget that moment, because if payment is a moment of value transfer, so I don't think that moment is worth to elaborate on. It's the experience around it, and creating and participating in that experience, making it frictionless or less friction, I think is where the name of the game is, and this is also where the money is. And I'll leave it at that, because this is where I do believe we'll find each other. And no matter in St. Petersburg, if it's going to be with a book or with a card, I mean, it's about the experience that you expect. And that's how the payment is going to be not interesting. That's my point. The payment is not interesting. It's the experience around.
Спасибо большое. Ну что ж, на мой субъективный взгляд получилось прекрасно.
Thank you very much. In my subjective opinion, everything seems to be really well done, a very good conversation we've had. And I would like to announce and declare the session completed, and I would like to wish you a safe trip home. Thank you.